In the course of this talk, I want to put some numbers in perspective. Who knows the width of a 1,000 shilling note? Any volunteers? Who knows the width of a 1,000 shilling note? It is actually 15 centimeters. With 1 billion shillings in 1,000 notes, you can line them up from here to Mombasa and walk on them to and from Mombasa 1.5 times. That is how much money that is. It is a lot of money. One of Kenya's biggest scandals, Golden Bug, Treasury reported lost $200 million. That is 20 billion shillings at current rates. And that, we can actually pave Nairobi to Mombasa Road with 1,000 shilling notes and not even have a pothole. Yeah. We can actually pave Nairobi to Mombasa without seeing a single pothole. The man I'm about to introduce to you tonight has a vision. He wants to build cities in Africa. He wants to build a city in Kenya. And so far he has spent upwards of 100 billion shillings. You know how much money that is? It is enough to employ 520,000 P1 teachers. So who should Uhuru Kenyatta be talking to? Your guess is as good as mine. That money has been used to create the master plan for Tatu City. It has been used to put infrastructure like power, water, sewage, to build a community for 70,000 people. This man is building Kenya. He's not taking anything from Kenya. He's actually putting his money in Kenya. And he's not even using government funds. But along the way, a few people have decided to make his life difficult. In fact, very, very difficult. Both in the boardroom and in the court, and now outside. That's why we have our God there. They're just being all Kenyan all the time. When Jeff Koinange wanted to interview this gentleman last night, they put a gag on Jeff Koinange. Ladies and gentlemen, the man I'm introducing you to here today is a native of New Zealand. And he's traveled through many, many countries to get here. He's not only a businessman, he's also a philanthropist. In his home county of Taranaki, one of the smallest in New Zealand, he's the main sponsor of their country's rugby team. And over the last 10 years, when he's been a sponsor, he's made that team come from the bottom of the table to the very top. If he was a Luo, he'd be saying, Guinea was a cow. Today, he lives in an aeroplane flying between 7 African countries, trying to build cities in Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and others. Stephen Jennings is considered an emerging markets pioneer. Whenever Stephen goes, other investors follow. When he went to Russia, there was no stock market. He built one from scratch. Mr. Jennings was recently featured in a book called Bankers Who Changed the World. Stephen is here today to tell us about his path as an entrepreneur, how he wants to build Tatu City, his fight against corruption, and how he wants to build Kenya's urban future. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you, Michael, for that very generous introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jumbo. It's really great to see everyone. I've been extremely lucky over the last 6 months to spend most of my time here in Nairobi because of all of the activity at Tatu City. And as a result, I've got to know and work with many wonderful Kenyans. I've got to know and work with many great Kenyan organisations, and I've got to know and make many new great Kenyan friends. Huku Nukama Nyambani. We're humbled by the level of support we've received from many quarters, and we're extremely grateful for your welcome. During this time, we've been able to develop a much clearer understanding of how business, the judiciary, the media, and civil society works in Kenya. As a result, more than ever, we believe Kenya has all the ingredients to be a developing market superstar. However, we also have a deeper appreciation of how much leadership, change, and courage we all need. Leadership, change, and courage to achieve Kenya's considerable potential. Leadership, change, and courage to deliver the full promise of Tatu City. Courage, in particular, is something that I'm going to return to later on. Today, I want to explain our vision for Tatu City and update you on the progress we're making. We believe it could become the most important urban development anywhere in Africa. I'm also going to give you the most detailed description yet of the theft, fraud, and extortion by Nahashan Yaga, his family, and associates. And I'm going to describe how Nyaga's partner, Vimal Shah, has provided him with a cloak of legitimacy to commit what is probably the largest corporate theft in Kenyan history. And I'll explain why they are doomed for failure and disgrace. But first, to quickly recap, what is Tatu City? Tatu City is a new, visionary, 2,500-acre satellite city for 80,000 residents and 30,000 daily visitors. The project has no government subsidies or government-provided land. And there's a strong emphasis on affordable housing, with many units costing as little as 2 million Kenyan shillings. Tatu City fits within Kenya's plan for decentralised development zones to alleviate congestion in central Nairobi. It's a Vision 2030 private sector project, and it's creating tens of thousands of jobs. Tatu City shareholders are investing over $500 million in infrastructure, including roads, water, sewage, and power that would not otherwise be built. Tatu's industrial park of 420 acres is one of the largest in East Africa. Our industrial clients are going to invest over $750 million in large-scale, state-of-the-art facilities to service East Africa and the world. One client alone has capital expenditure plans for over $150 million. Large areas are reserved for medical and educational facilities, and many of these will receive subsidised land. Around a third of the land is set aside for parks, playgrounds, and open spaces. In effect, Tatu City is redefining the quality and scale of urban development in Kenya, and it has the potential to become a benchmark across Africa. So how did it come about? Let's start with a little history. Socfenaf is a Belgian rubber and coffee company, and from the 1960s to 2008, they owned 13,500 acres of coffee estates in Kiambu County. Today, this land is collectively known as Tatu and the Socfenaf Estates. In 2007, Socfenaf attempted to sell this land to a number of prominent Kenyan landowners. They were unsuccessful. Late in 2007, Vimal Shah approached me. Shah was acting in a consortium with Nahashan Yaga and Steve Mugweru. He proposed that my business put up 100% of the money to buy 2,500 acres at Tatu. He also suggested that we pay for an option to buy the 11,000-acre Socfenaf Estates. VMAL said they would ensure there was strong political and local support for our vision. VMAL and his partners also agreed that my business should have management control of the project by appointing a majority of the board of directors. Given that I was putting up 100% of the money, this was a precondition for my participation. VMAL was charming and persuasive. He promised that he and his partners would do everything possible to assist the project. He assured me that there would be no political or legal obstacles to the rapid development of Tatu City. Why else would I consider giving Shah and his partners a large shareholding when I was putting up 100% of the money? Very naively, I took Vimal Shah at his word. On July the 8th, 2008, my company and our international partners arranged to pay $21.8 million for our investment in Tatu. The screen shows the wiring instructions. Then in March 2010, we paid $62.5 million to buy the Kofinaf estates. Once again, the screen shows the wiring instructions. In 2012, a Mauritian company that we understand Vimal Shah controls invested $289,000. This is his only investment in the project, even though he has referred to himself as a major investor in Tatu. It represents less than 0.3% of the total cost of the project. Nahash Nyaga and Steve Magweru have invested precisely nothing. So today, over $100 million has been invested in Tatu and in the purchase of the Kofinaf estates. My business and international partners have paid for 99.7% of the total investment. In addition, my business gave Vimal Shah and his partners a loan of almost $11 million to enable them to participate in the purchase of Tatu City. To date, they have not repaid a single shilling. Moreover, Nyaga demanded payment for his services as a board member. You can see details on the screen of payments made to Nyaga amounting to $818,000. None of my board members, the Rendeavour board members, have ever been paid. In short, between them, Mr. Shah, Nyaga and Magweru have made a negative financial contribution of over $500,000. This may come as a surprise to you, since Mr. Nyaga and Mr. Shah claim to be major investors and controlling shareholders. They're imposters on both counts. Others have told us that Mr. Nyaga and Shah frequently claim that it's their land or that they control Tatu. Now, how can that be the case when they haven't invested and when Sokfinaf owned the land for the previous 50 years? Now I'd like to show you the real shareholding structure of Tatu City. Vimal Shah holds his shareholding in Tatu and Kofinaf through a Mauritian company called Red Line. Nyaga and Magweru hold theirs through another Mauritian company called Black Knight. As the chart shows, Red Line and Black Knight are shareholders in a third Mauritian company called Manhattan Coffee International Holdings. Here is an excerpt from the annual report of Manhattan Coffee for the year ending 2013. Steve Magweru presented these accounts to the Mauritian Supreme Court late last year. They show that at the time, Manhattan Coffee's shareholding in Tatu and the Kofinaf estates was 26%. Since then, it's been reduced to 23.1% through the conversion of unpaid debt into equity. My business, Rendeavour, and our international co-investors currently own about 70% of Tatu and Kofinaf estates. Any member of the public can obtain all these figures from the Mauritian Registrar of Companies. Meanwhile, Justice Masinga in Kenya confirmed in January 2013 that more than 99% of Tatu and Kofanaf is owned by Mauritian companies. Given this ownership structure, it's not surprising that the main legal agreements between the shareholders of Tatu and Kofanaf estates are subject to Mauritian law. To further strengthen the role of the international courts, Tatu City and Kofanaf shareholders also agreed that shareholder disputes would be subject to the London Court of International Arbitration. Surprisingly, none of the Kenyan shareholders have ever taken action in either of these jurisdictions, despite their frequent claims of victimization and shareholder abuse. Rather, they've chosen to attack us in the Kenyan courts, where they believe they can try to manipulate things for their advantage. The Mauritian courts also provide a key clue as to why Nahashinyaga is intent on extortion from Tatu City, despite supposedly being a major shareholder. In 2014, Black Knight, the investment vehicle of Mugweru and Nyaga, made 2 capital calls from its shareholders to fund Black Knight's operating expenses. Once again, Nyaga didn't put up any money. As a result, his shareholding in Black Knight was reduced from 33% to 15%, as you can see in this chart. Nyaga went to court in Mauritius twice against Mugweru, claiming that the capital increase was illegal. As you can see on this slide, the Mauritian judge threw Nyaga's claim out of court, saying, quote, "Upon my observation that the claim and the affidavit diverge, I set the application aside," unquote. Given that Manhattan Coffee owns 23.1% of Kofanaf and Tatu, this means that Nyaga's ultimate interest is only 1.8%. This must have been a bitter pill for a man who claimed he controlled Tatu and was one of the biggest landowners in Nairobi. Perhaps Nyaga had even spent the money that was never his. He and his lawyer, Nelson Harvey, soon came up with an inventive solution for this little conundrum: to use all possible extortionate means to get the land that was never rightfully his and for which he never paid anything. Mr. Nyaga has also played the race card in a crude and blatant fashion. He kept saying that we're Russian and that he's fighting the Russian mafia. There's a pattern to Nyaga's lying. He doesn't manipulate the truth or exaggerate. Rather, he creates an Alice in Nyaga-land world of complete fantasy and expects others to believe him. Opinion leaders in Nairobi soon figured out that we are in fact major international investors from the US, the UK, Norway, and New Zealand. In their latest slur, Nyaga and Mugweru have been trying to fan the flames by spreading the idea that we're white land grabbers. Coming from a country that was colonized, I understand how incendiary those comments can be. But what do you call it when local businessmen invite a foreign investor to buy land from Belgians and at the same time to lend them $11 million to purchase their own stake? Is that land grabbing? Or is the correct phrase perhaps land giving? Anyway, how about some good news? What heartens me is that Tatu City has received tremendous support from the Kenyan business community and many, many other groups and individuals. The first residential phase of Tatu City is called Kajaani Ridge and is set over 150 acres. The Foreign Minister, Amina Mohammed, the UN Ambassador, Robert Godek, the Governor of Kiambu County, William Kabogo, attended the groundbreaking ceremony for Kajaani Ridge back in July. The demand for residential land has been fantastic. Transactions are underway for over 130 serviced plots. In addition, we're at an advanced stage with 3 Kenyan housing developers for large-scale new housing developments. These have 5,000 units, ranging from affordable units to upmarket houses. Progress at the industrial park has been equally impressive. Buyers of large serviced industrial plots include the likes of Dormans, Cooper K Brands, Maxim, Kimfei, and Bidco Africa. These companies are all now major landowners at Tatu City. Many have become strong business partners and buyers of multiple residential sites. We're in discussions with more than a dozen other large industrial land buyers. Dormans has broken ground and is building its corporate headquarters at Tatu. They're also building processing, packaging, warehousing, and trading facilities to handle more than 15,000 tonnes of coffee per year. Dormans will have over 200 full-time employees. Kimfei will build its new corporate headquarters, as well as manufacturing, distribution, and warehousing facilities. Several multinationals are interested in building modern, new, state-of-the-art industrial facilities to service East Africa and beyond. And as I said previously, we estimate that our industrial customers will invest over $750 million in new state-of-the-art commercial and industrial facilities. We're also in advanced discussions with several schools and hospitals interested in locating at Tatu. And over time, these groups will become the major owners of the land at Tatu City. There's other good news too. Infrastructure plans for water, sewerage, power, roads and broadband are all well on track to meet the needs of the new owners and residents. Our aim is to complete all infrastructure by the end of next year. This infrastructure is one of Tatu City's key distinguishing strengths. And this simply wouldn't have been possible without the incredible support of the Kiambu County Government, Ruiru Sub-County, Kenya Power and Lighting Company, NEMA, Athi Water Services Board, and the Kenyan Highways Authority. We're extremely grateful for their commitment to modernising Nairobi and for their support for Tatu City. So, what's the really good news? We all have a dream, don't we? Don't we? Well, mine involves Tatu City. My dream is to turn Tatu City into the largest and best urban development on the African continent. And it can all be done over the next 5 to 10 years. Rendeavour, my business, has 7 city-sized developments across Africa, but none has the potential of Tatu. The World Bank has repeatedly advised that infrastructure is key to successful growth and modernisation in sub-Saharan Africa. They estimate that approximately 50% of the acceleration of GDP growth across the region is due to an increased infrastructure investment. Kenya is a strong performer. Take, for example, the Lapsset Corridor, the standard gauge railway from Mombasa to Malabar, Olkaria, one of the largest geothermal projects on the planet, the 300 megawatt Turkana wind power plant, and the new 56 billion Kenyan shilling terminal at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Imagine if we could add Africa's best and most recognised city to the mix. Tatu and Kofanaf have the land, and Rendeavour has the experience and the financial resources to double the size of Tatu. Let's call it Tatu Mega for now. Just think for a minute what that would mean. 40,000 affordable and middle-class housing units, a more than 5% reduction in Kenya's housing deficit, up to 50,000 brand new jobs, the largest industrial park in East Africa, a couple of $2 billion of modern commercial and industrial investment from Kenyan and multinational corporates, several major new schools and hospitals, a large new city that would massively reduce congestion in central Nairobi and reverse traffic flows between the centre and Kiambu County. In addition, there would be two huge knock-on effects. First, as with the initial phase of Tatu, there would be many imitators in Nairobi and in other cities across Kenya. Together, they would create a powerful multiplier effect, kick-starting modern urban infrastructure development across the country. Second, the message to the outside world would be extremely powerful. Kenya is Africa's leader and pathbreaker in urban development. Kenya has the best infrastructure on the continent for large-scale commercial and industrial development. As with Phase 1 of Tatu City, Tatu Mega will require considerable coordination with government planning bodies, utilities and Kiambu County. We've had tremendous support in these areas in the past. And the financial commitment from the government would be precisely zero. And who would end up owning Tatu Mega? The thousands of Kenyan households, industrialists, commercial and retail businesses, and a handful of multinationals that make Tatu City or Tatu Mega their home. We want to make this dream a reality, but it can't come to fruition until we've resolved serious issues of corruption. So we've had the good and the bad. I guess it's time for the ugly. And there's no great detective case without a really bad crime. And judging by the size of the audience, looks like it's time to reveal it. So what is the crime, and how are Nyaga and his cronies trying to extort us? Before moving into the details of how the fraud has been perpetrated, recall that Nyaga's shareholding is tiny. When I explain this to business leaders in Nairobi, they're typically disgusted. They ask me, how could a 1.8% shareholder be so selfish and greedy to disrupt the nationally critical project through repeated old-school attempts at low-level corruption? Nyaga's most serious crime is tied up with the issue of land sales. The land sales from Kofinaf Estates commenced in 2013. The Kofinaf board, including Mr. Shah and Mr. Nyaga, approved each land sale. The board also agreed that the proceeds would mainly be used to repay debt provided by my business to fund the acquisition of the Kofinaf Estates. In fact, this was a legal obligation of the loan agreement signed by Nyaga and approved by the board. Sales proceeds would also be used to fund the infrastructure build-out at Tatu City. 4 land sales to reputable Kenyan buyers were completed in 2013. These had the support of all board members. The buyers included Kenyatta University and Diako Bustani, which is owned by Titus Muya. There were no objections from Vimal Shah or Nyaga. Mr. Muya of Daikyo enjoyed the experience of working with us so much, he came back for a second purchase. This property of 1,242 acres is located in Ruera. Kofinaf signed a sales and purchase agreement with Daikyo for Ruera in December of 2014, and Daikyo paid a deposit of 10% of the sales price. Once again, this transaction was supported by Mr. Nyaga and Mr. Shah. However, in March of this year, just as Kofinaf was about to close the Ruera land sale with Daikyo, we uncovered the fraudulent transfer of over $100 million of land, that's more than 10 billion Kenyan shillings, to Nyaga's family and friends. The land transferred included Daikyo's Ruera block, plus a further 1,053 acres of adjacent land. Just to be clear, that's more than 2,000 acres of land worth over $100 million. As with his lies, Nyaga's theft was blatant and crude. The thief's impunity was such that he barely attempted to cover his tracks. I'll focus on the theft of the Ruera land parcel that had been sold to Daikyo, but Nyaga's attempted fraud on 2 other land titles is identical. Nyaga simply orchestrated a fraudulent change of the directors and shareholders in the Kenyan companies to remove them from the ownership and control of Kofanaf and into structures controlled by him. Now, it's a matter of public record that these changes purportedly took place on the 3rd of March this year, just in time to block the Daikyo sale. The record also identifies the new directors and shareholders of the companies purporting to own 1,242 acres of prime coffee land in Ruera. You can see the individuals on this slide. They're Nyaga's cousin, Jeremy Nyaga, a farmer. A casual labourer on Nyaga's farm. Nyaga's sister, Rachel Mugo, a Nairobi lawyer. A friend through Nyaga's younger brother, who's a clothes designer. 3 second-hand clothes salespeople from Moy Avenue who happen to be friends of Nyaga's sister. A music producer and friend of Nyaga. A guard employed at Nyaga's house. An employee of Nyaga's sister. And finally, Jane Gachoga, Nyaga's sister-in-law, who works as a senior relationship manager at the Commercial Bank of Africa. None of these people have ever dealt in large-scale real estate transactions. Indeed, none of them claim to have paid anything for their stake in a parcel of land worth $55 million US. But remember, we're in Alison Nyaga land, so suspend all logic. All these individuals claim the purported land transaction was legitimate and had absolutely nothing to do with Nahasha Nyaga. So we're expected to believe that Kofanaf decided to sell $55 million of land for nothing, and that Nyaga had nothing to do with these transactions, even though each of these individuals is very closely connected to him. Well, I'm not a big believer in fairy stories. In May of this year, we commenced a civil case in the High Court of Kenya. We succeeded in our request for an injunction prohibiting any further attempts to alter the ownership of the properties in question. And this morning we received a ruling in our favour preventing Nyaga's lawyer, Nelson Harvey's attempt to remove himself from this case. We believe he is intimately involved in the complicated structuring of the crime. In addition, Kofanaf filed a criminal complaint with the Directorate of Criminal Investigations on the 3rd of August this year concerning the theft of the Ruera land block by Nyaga. Many statements have been filed in our support. These include statements by Pius Ngugi, Titus Muya, Anthony Irogo, the acting CEO of Tatu City, and Amin Musa, a senior partner at Anjawala and Kamen. Press coverage suggests the police have interviewed 17 of the 19 individuals named in Kofanaf's civil fraud case. This includes Nyaga, his lawyer Nelson Harvey, his sister-in-law Rachel Mugo, his cousin Jeremy Nyaga, and Lucas Omariba, who was dismissed as the CEO of Tatu by the controlling shareholders. Press have reported that the in-depth police investigation has demanded the case should be referred for arrest and prosecution of the suspects, and that it has suffered interference from certain members of the CID whose actions protect Nyaga from prosecution. But in Alison Nyaga land, an open and shut police file recommending prosecution seems to count for little. Nahasha Nyaga, Nelson Harvey and other suspects were granted an order prohibiting the Inspector General of the National Police Service, the Director of the Criminal Investigations Department, and the Director of Public Prosecutions from continuing a criminal prosecution of these individuals pending a hearing on the 21st of September. That's right. The criminals went to court to block an investigation into their own crimes and to prevent their arrest. That sets a handy precedent for other thieves and extortionists out there. Fortunately, our legal advice on this matter is that the courts cannot usurp the constitutional authority of the police to investigate a criminal complaint. Once again, Nyaga is trying to obstruct the course of justice. Nyaga's lawyer, Nelson Harvey, is a party to these crimes. He's been camped out at the CID for the last few days. The police file recommending prosecution of the suspects is complete, according to press reports. Harvey is doing everything possible to block its transfer to the public prosecutor. Harvey and his associate Wycliffe Osawandra also manipulated handwriting specialist Superintendent Mwindi to write a false report on the signatures of certain of the nominees involved in the fraud. In general, though, we believe our criminal complaint has been dealt with professionally and has been properly investigated by the police. And these attempts to interfere with the rule of law can only slow but not stop the course of justice. We're highly confident that Nyaga and his co-fraudsters will be prosecuted, convicted, and jailed. And their sentences should reflect the magnitude of their crimes. This would send an incredibly strong message to the international and domestic investment community. You might be asking yourself, what's Mr. Shah been doing? Mr. Shah, who's a shareholder in the business that has been defrauded. After all, he claims to be a high-profile champion, both here and internationally, of good governance. Well, Mr. Shah hasn't lifted a finger or uttered a word of rebuke to Nyaga, nor has he offered any support of any kind to the majority shareholders who have been battling day and night to recover the assets. Worse still, according to press reports, Shah refused even to make a statement to the police when they contacted him for questioning. No international investor is going to invest in Kenya without studying the Tatu saga. Yet Mr. Shah, the former chairman and current director of the Kenyan Private Sector Alliance, an organisation that aims to promote good business ethics, appears to be acquiescing in one of the largest corporate thefts in Kenyan history. The problem, you see, is that Mr. Shah has a conflict between his legal obligations to Tatu and his alliance with Mr. Nyaga. From the outset, Mr. Shah and Mr. Nyaga have been partners. They were both indirect shareholders in a Mauritian company, as we've seen. More recently, Mr. Shah and Mr. Nyaga together launched a vexatious lawsuit against me and several of my colleagues. The background to this will complete your understanding. In 2014, Tatu completed only 10% of its sales budget, and the project was falling way behind on its infrastructure rollout. The CEO had no previous real estate experience and was a weak leader. Management clearly needed to be strengthened. The controlling shareholders started pushing for better performance. It quickly became clear that Mr. Nyaga did not grasp the situation. This was not surprising given that he didn't have the high level of commercial experience required to be the chairman of a major company. After all, he's not a businessman. He also began acting like a prima donna, more worried about his status than results. For example, he would unilaterally close board meetings without a vote if things started to go against him. Hardly appropriate from the chairman of the largest urban development company in East Africa. I also had growing concerns about his honesty and integrity. Then on the 23rd of January, several of my colleagues and I were unexpectedly summoned to the Immigration Department without any proper justification. We were interrogated for half a day about work permits. We were not shown any official documents. Now, I'm an international investor. I'm not an employee. And in 25 years of working in around 35 emerging markets, this was my first experience of this form of cheap harassment. Of course, there's no official file because this was a crude and corrupt shakedown. My investigations quickly led to the source of this harassment, Nahashan Yaga and one of his brothers. I now knew I was dealing with a crook. Only time would show how bad a crook. It simply wasn't tenable to continue with an incompetent and corrupt chairman. A chairman who wanted to be paid a fortune but had never invested any money in the project in the first place. In late January, all directors were notified of a board meeting to be held on the 5th of February. At that meeting, in accordance with the company's Articles of Association, the board voted to remove Mr. Nyaga as chairman while retaining him as a board member. Mr. Pius Ngugi, a highly respected businessman from Kiambu, was appointed as the new chairman. In addition, Frank Mosier, my American partner in Rendeavour and a massive investor in Tatu, was also made a board member. Now, Mr. Nyaga has stated publicly on numerous occasions that we kicked him off the board. This is another Alice in Nyaga-land fantasy. Immediately following the removal of Nyaga as chairman, Shah and Nyaga went to court to try to have Tatu City project frozen. They attempted to do so on an ex-parte basis, meaning for the benefit of one party and without the board's knowledge. The sitting judge refused the application and ordered both parties to appear on the 27th of February to argue their respective cases. But not satisfied with this result, Shah and Nyaga approached another judge out of hours. This judge granted the freezing order on the spot, 2 days before the scheduled hearing at which everyone would have had a chance to present their case. This was highly irregular, to say the least. So what are Shah and Nyaga seeking from this highly irregular court case? And what has the judge granted them on an interim basis? First, they're requesting that Nyaga remains as chairman. Yes, that's right. Mr. Shah is saying the company must keep Nyaga as chairman even though he's tried to steal land worth $100 million from the company. And he's saying that the majority shareholders who funded 99.7% of the project shouldn't be able to appoint the chairman, even though that's what the company's constitution says. Second, Mr. Shah and Mr. Nyaga claim that my company has misappropriated monies from COFINAF by overstating the amount payable under the loan used to fund the purchase of COFINAF estates. Perhaps that's their way of saying thank you for funding their investment. Third, they say there should be a special audit of the loan account and that until this is complete, the loan should be frozen. Critically, they're saying the audit can only be undertaken by PwC Kenya. They also sought, and were refused, an order freezing the use of our bank accounts. This would have resulted in us not being able to employ employees and contractors for committed infrastructure work. Just ask yourself, why would bona fide shareholders undertake such a destructive move? Finally, they sought to block the appointment to the board of Pius Ngugi and Frank Mosier. This was also refused by the court. Let me give you a few of the reasons why this is just another attempt to block the effective operation of the company in a shakedown. Shah and Nyaga have received updates on the status of the loan as the next slide shows. Here is an email from our team, the subject, offshore loan statement. In this and other communication, all board members were kept appraised of the loan's status. There was never any suggestion of improper conduct by Rendeavour until Nyaga was removed as chairman. The lender and the borrower are both Mauritian entities, and the loan agreement is governed by English law. Shah and Nyaga know they'll be thrown out of court in Mauritius, so they haven't even tried to use the proper legal venues. The issue has nothing to do with the Kenyan courts, but nevertheless, Rendeavour strongly supports the idea of a special audit. In fact, the board agreed to this before Shah and Nyaga went to court. This will prove that their behaviour is vexatious. The majority shareholders are also happy to appoint any major audit firm in the world except PwC Kenya. We'll even work with PwC officers outside of Kenya. PwC are the auditors of Bidco, Shah's main business, so they have a conflict of interest. Several PwC partners are personally close to Shah, and there are other business links. According to accepted ethics and judgment of conflict of interest, this would normally automatically exclude them from this role. Finally, Nyaga's lawyer has repeatedly tried to negotiate with us to obtain a land parcel which is totally out of proportion with his 1.8% shareholding. Nyaga doesn't want an audit. He wants land that's not his. In other words, the audit case is another crude shakedown attempt, which together with the land theft is designed to extort the investors which have funded Tatu and Kofanaf. So let me quickly summarise before moving on to some concluding comments. Between them, Shah and Nyaga have made a negative financial contribution. Nyaga's indirect shareholding is a minuscule 1.8%. As a result, he has no compunction in damaging the project. Indeed, he's fraudulently tried to steal $100 million of land. Mr. Shah has gone to court to support Mr. Nyaga, remaining as chairman. In addition, Mr. Shah and Mr. Nyaga have attempted to place an effective freeze on the Tatu project and to require a special audit of the loan account undertaken only by PwC Kenya, a firm with which they have deep ties. The special audit is a matter for the boardroom, not the courts. And if it were a legal matter, the jurisdiction is a Mauritian rather than a Kenyan court. So to wrap up, many, many Kenyans have thanked us for taking a stand on corporate corruption. Others have said, thank you. Others have said, not surprisingly, that we're crazy. It's easy to point the finger at government when talking about Kenya's sharply deteriorating corruption rankings. And remember, corruption is the biggest issue holding your country back. But what we've found in Kenya is that a huge amount of corruption originates in the private sector. You've got incredibly skilled business people who are forced to coexist with total crooks and thugs. And those crooks are masters at using the tax, judicial, and police systems to hurt their competitors and gain competitive advantage. They're not good business people. They're simply good at manipulating the system. And they're also adept at buying respectability and subverting high-profile institutions domestically and internationally for their own ends. In other words, they're also shameless hypocrites. I do understand why many good people are reluctant to stand up and fight corporate corruption. The incredible sense of impunity felt by the crooks is backed by a notable climate of intimidation. We know that hardcore criminal elements have already been involved in our situation. One of our lawyers recently received a chilling written threat of retribution. We've already traced this to a member of Nyaga's family. Someone who was helping to try and organise this event was told by a contact to pull out because, quote, "Vmail will send thugs to beat you up," unquote. Now, I don't know if that's realistic, but I do know that the mere idea that someone would even think like that is totally unacceptable in any normal or remotely normal business environment. We are not intimidated. We're not even slightly intimidated. We won't stop until our assets are protected and the thieves are punished. But what's more, we're really inspired by the talent and the desire for change, the potential for change we see every day in Nairobi. We're really humbled by the tremendous support that you've given us. But change does require courage. You can't always rely on someone else to make the first step. The potential for growth and development in Kenya is truly extraordinary, but it's not going to happen without improved standards of corporate behaviour. We intend to make a number of tangible steps to try and help. To begin with, we'll be commissioning a senior investigative journalist to write an in-depth book on the Tatu saga. And given some of the gagging orders, perhaps we better publish it in the UK rather than Nairobi. And this will fully expose all of the individuals who have been involved or assisted in any of the efforts to steal from or extort Tatu City and Kofanaf. I encourage on other corporate leaders to call out, to name and shame those guilty in your midst, and to speak with real conviction. I'd like to think that our experience at Rendeavour and Tatu could help contribute to a turning point, that it might embolden the citizens of Kenya to create a forum for change, that individuals and organisations might come together to create an independent body to fight corruption. Bullies are normally, almost always, cowards. If we fight them collectively, you'll be very surprised how quickly behaviour changes and the environment improves. Finally, we are incredibly committed to making Tatu City a shining star, a star that will help to reveal Kenya's truly extraordinary potential. Asante sana.